Hi everybody, I'm Anuradha SenGupta and you're watching the Media Dialogues. Now, as we close out the month of March, I'd like to take stock of how brands and companies across products and services across industries participated in International Women's Day. It seemed like everyone had a special ad or announcement to make, didn't they? And that's wonderful. But how substantive is this contribution in the long, hard slog to gender equality? Does it reflect real changes in society and what women expect, or is it mere tokenism? And what was the collective messaging? Feminism or consumerism or a mishmash? For answers and insights, I dare say I have the perfect guests with me today. Please welcome Abanti Sankaranarayanan. She's the Chief Strategy and Corporate Affairs Officer of Diageo India. She's also a member of its executive committee. Paromita Vohra, filmmaker, writer, columnist. She's the founder and creative director of Agents of Ishq. And Swati Bhattacharya, she's the Chief Creative Officer of the ad agency FCB Ulka. Ladies, it's lovely to have you join me. It's good to see you. And I'm going to start by showing you a little montage of all the communication and all the ads we saw in the run-up and through the month of March.
आखिर कितनी खूबसूरती काफी है? डव, खामियां नहीं, खूबियां देखिए।
3-व्हीलर चलाने वाली महिलाओं को महिंद्रा अल्फा का सलाम।
For women, it's practically debarred to learn to know and to focus on money.
Paromita, let me start with you. Women driving trucks and tractors, women rejecting suitors, women announcing new ways of looking at themselves and what they consider beauty to be. How do you assess all this messaging that we saw over the past month?
Well, I mean, I think there was, now it has become a time of dread. You know that there's going to be all these ads on Women's Day, which will put forward a kind of new stereotype of the new woman, if you know what I mean. So I think maybe what we're suffering from is the idea that talking about women in a sense of liberation has also become a template now in advertising. So there are stock images of liberation that are just trotted out. But as I wrote in a piece on Women's Day, it often feels like boys on a dating app just throwing out these hapless lines, right? Like somebody has been told that these kinds of lines work with women. So it feels sometimes like ads are also just, I think this works with women, without really thinking about what it is that women might want or respond to or what's going on with women nowadays. So I think on the whole, there was a sense of boredom and ennui, not even of irritation in seeing the ads.
Okay, those are strong words. Abanti, did you feel like that? How do you assess what's going on? There's literally in my inbox through the month of March, I cannot tell you the number of emails on new ads, new communications, new initiatives. How are you seeing and assessing what's going on?
Well, I think International Women's Day provides a natural point in time when some companies and brands decide to heighten the pitch. And that certainly is the case. And I would agree with you and Paromita on that. But I think what is underlining that heightened pitch on that one day or 1 week is a significant progress that corporations and brands have made in keeping with larger movements and societal trends towards recognizing that gender equality can be given a big stimulus through the role that they play in society and advertising, and then deciding where on that scale of continuum they want to be. And different companies are at different ends of that kind of spectrum, and some are in the middle. But I would say that absolutely it reflects that many companies are taking note of the larger changes in society. They recognize that they have a role to play, and depending on how they choose to play it, you see the manifestation either in policies that they might introduce or take forward in the way they hire, in the brands that, in the brand language and tonality in advertising. and so on. So I feel that it's a larger shift in society and movements in society that they are mirroring. And yes, it does reach a little bit of a crescendo during International Women's Day.
Okay. Swati, interesting point. Abanti says it does reflect a larger shift, and different companies, different brands are in different, at different places in that spectrum when it comes to how authentic their messaging is or how much they are able to really plug into what's happening. Where would you put on a scale of 1 to 10 where most marketers and brands are when it comes to actually getting their finger on the pulse of what women want and what women are today? Because like Paro just alluded to the fact that, it's a new kind of stereotype that's being projected and an old one is retired.
Yeah, so, it is talking to women, it's like, you can't say women is just one thing and,
sure.
All women like stuff which is tailored for women. It is little complex and it's little layered. Now, I'm not in the camp of wanting tokenism, but I feel for many brands, it's a little baby step. So through the year, they are too nervous to only talk to women, but on Women's Day, it's one little baby step they take. And a lot of it may be clumsy, a lot of it may not be good, but there are such few stories about women that at this point, I feel more the merrier. And obviously what is memorable and will have to be qualitatively like a good thing. But I feel a day like Women's Day helps these brands to at least work on those dead muscles, because they are so scared of intimacy. They are so scared of connecting that, this gives them like a little bit like a dress rehearsal.
Do you hear them feel a sense of, this pressure on them that they've got to have something on Women's Day, that they've got to do their bit? Do you feel that they have that kind of pressure on them?
No, they don't have the pressure. I think a lot of the times the agencies want them to put out something on that day. And the only time they are okay to do something so gendered is Women's Day, and brands which are truly talking to women for the whole year,
yes,
I think they don't do too much of this tokenism thing. Like, I don't think FTB had a single Women's Day ad, because we do a lot of work, keeping our women as target audience all through the year.
Right. So, Paromita, it's interesting what Swati says, that there are brands that have women directly as consumers and their target audience, and the communication to them may be different from what we see every other brand try and do a little bit of. Are you seeing that? Are you sensing that? You talked about feeling bored with the onslaught of stuff that was out there.
Well, I was listening to Swati talk. I think one of the things that she said, it's nice for them to work that muscle. But as we know about muscles, you can't work them only for one day. Muscle is something that has to be built throughout the year. So to that extent, I think if you suddenly decide that you're going to talk to women, about women, and try to reflect some of the very complex changes that are taking place in society around us, you can't do it just one day. You have to be doing it in toto throughout, and you have to understand it deeply and reflect it back in a complex and layered fashion, as she said. So I think that the baby steps, the clumsiness, the fear, it also mirrors something in society, right? It does. What's happening is not just mirroring the positive changes, but the deep reluctance to actually confront changes in gender, the deep reluctance to really embrace and celebrate change is so hardwired into mainstream spaces, and that is what makes them conservative. Being conservative is not only about holding on to one set of thoughts that somebody had 30 years ago, but the inability to be flexible and open and embrace what is coming and what is happening around you. If you look at the stories women are telling about themselves, whether it's women within protests, whether it is women on social media, you can see a far different and a far more polyglot kind of reality. But I think that the conservative tendency of, maybe we shouldn't be too radical, we shouldn't be too this, ends up creating something which is neither here nor there. So that's what makes it tokenistic, but worse, I think it makes it a kind of template. And a template, as you know, can sometimes be efficient, but often can also lead to a lot of mediocrity. And I think that's what you kind of see, right? A mediocrity in how people are looking at women, not only in the stories that they're creating, but the way they're looking at life itself, therefore.
Sure. Abanti, all companies in the 21st century, national companies, multinational companies, do have a very, very big focus and a sort of diversity and inclusion mandate. Your company, your brands don't advertise in India because of the regulations in this country. What are some of the things that you've got to do and you're doing, in order to push inclusion and diversity?
Yeah, so actually, before I answer that, I just want to also, share a different perspective from what Paromita just said.
Sure, sure.
When we look at the swath of advertising, and we as Diageo have done a study actually last year as well as this year, and looking at about 150 advertisements across different sectors and categories. And we feel more hopeful both about brands and advertising and the position they are taking on inclusivity, but also, therefore, very clear that that's the path that certainly companies like us want to take. And while there is a proportion of advertising that's still regressive, there is what we find, and a pretty decent percentage. In fact, I would say over 35 odd % of the advertising that we looked at, those are actually either moving towards progress or progressive, or actually beyond just gender, but more broadly inclusive. And so I think there is something beyond companies and brands just waking up on International Women's Day. There is a shift. Yes, it is not what we may want it to be, but I think it's certainly a fundamental shift that's starting to come through. We are very clear that as a company, diversity and inclusivity is very, very core to our purpose, which is celebrating life every day, everywhere. And as part of celebrating life every day, everywhere, we absolutely feel that as a company, we must enable all sections of society, including marginalized sections, be it on the basis of gender, ethnicity, ability, etc., to be the best that they can. In India, as you said, we can't advertise the product directly, but we do brand extension advertising. And I think we have come some way. I think, like many other traditionally masculine sectors, there is more to do in terms of showing women, in terms of characterization, representation, agency, as well as, perspective. We can do more. Absolutely, we agree there. And we will be doing more. And, I would just say, watch that space. But we are deeply cognizant that as a company and as a big company with big iconic brands, we absolutely have to play our role in society. And I think there is genuine intent there.
Sure.
And one of the things I would also say is, if you look at companies like us and the progress that we have made within our own ecosystem of where we were in terms of gender diversity, let's say 5 years ago, we were about 7.5%, 8% to where we are now, which is 20%. We've recently announced Hina Nagarajan as the first woman CEO of the company. 4 out of 8 ExCom members, with Hina coming in, will be women. And among the top 40 leaders in the company, about 28% will be women. And then we have about 12 to 15% executives and managers in our supply and manufacturing function, which are women. And that's a sea change from what this company was about 5 or 6 years ago. And I always like to say that if an Alco-Bev company in India can get this far, then so can many other companies which operate in traditional sectors.
Let me pull Swati in here, Abanti, because you talked about the fact that there have been big steps, at least in your company, in getting diversity and getting women in different roles across board, right? Swati, does that make a difference, having women in charge, whether it's at marketers, whether it's at agencies, and therefore the kind of communication and therefore the kind of messaging that goes out via marketing communication?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, when you have different kinds of people with different kinds of voices, it directly impacts the kind of storytelling that comes out of your organization, whether you're a client or whether you're an agency. It definitely affects the quality of storytelling. it definitely affects the kind of goal setting that you want to do. So I have seen, like when people say this is our CSR budget, and we want to do something for women. And I remember the Stridhan campaign for anemia that I had done. It in a way, the client's commitment, and there were women on the other side, and they understood that you can't just do a boring, have more iron, or the scary statistics that 1 out of 2 women. So there were more voices that were, voting ideas and saying, yes, we need to do something which as a message attracts women to do something about themselves. And that kind of a thing doesn't happen if there aren't, too many women, because men have, even in they work pretty much like a cup panchayat in a boardroom. They feel very like, if you want to do something nice and sexy, that scares them. They have a set image of, and they want you to, the way they look at motherhood, the way they look at a woman as just a nutritional provider. And I think it's only more women that help them relax into, to get out of this quasi-worship mode when they're creating advertising.
We saw Unilever, the largest, consumer goods company, or one of the largest consumer goods companies in the world, announce shockingly last year that they were going to change their iconic super brand Fair and Lovely into Glow and Lovely. And this year, to mark Women's Day, around that time, they made this big announcement about how they would no longer use normal, in quotes, in any of their advertising, communication or packaging, that they would have a positive beauty vision that they would, that they would put out there, and they would eliminate these narrow stereotypes of what is good looking and what is normal when it comes to beauty. What do you make of that?
Well, I think, words are so useful, because by changing words, we sometimes don't need to change anything else, right? So I think that's something that we all have to be careful about. I would say that anybody who wants to change, one would want to welcome that idea and want to engage with it in all sincerity. But if you think that, changing the name of a brand which has a history and which does not even need to be said, of stigmatizing skin color, and was called Fair and Lovely and is then called Glow and Lovely, but continues to be the same thing, right? And continues to sort of play on the same insecurities and prejudices, one has to question what is the meaningfulness of that, I do think. And as for not using the word normal, the real question would be, to what extent is the word normal already being used in all of these brands? Who wants to buy a beauty product to be normal? We all buy it because we think we'll be better than the normal, or that we'll be aspirationally beautiful, or whatever it is. I just think that these kinds of conversations remaining in a small pocket of space, right? That is to say, it becomes like a quota system of storytelling. I know that advertising is meant to sell products. Of course, that's its first job and duty, perhaps. But it is also storytelling, and it is also part of the vast complex of images and stories that we internalize. So I do think that if advertising has room for so many different kinds of men to be represented across the board in different kinds of product ads, why they're not able to let go of this templated woman who, in the quota of beauty products, there may be a little bit of token nod to body positivity, but on the whole, the idea of womanhood won't ever change. I think that resistance to gender or to caste or to queerness comes from this kind of a normative elite, right? So yes, maybe when companies really change their diversity, this too will change. But as you can see, I'm not like rushing and excited when somebody announces.
Yeah, I can hear that, which is why I'm going to bring Swati in here. When Unilever says that it will not digitally alter body shape, size, skin color anymore. I mean, advertising has always manipulated this over the ages across the countries, across products, isn't it? So to sell all kinds of products. So do you see these as really big radical shifts? I feel that if a company really changes track like this and all that money goes into creating different images, maybe we will really see change. Which side would you go, given that Unilever is a client of yours?
I know. No, I think, look at Unilever's history with a brand like Dove and what they have managed to do out there, in the markets that they are in, like, Dove happened in Brazil, where the beauty thing is so strong. And then look at how much time they took to do even that first step of Glow and Lovely. So what happens with these big multinational clients is that they are so at the mercy of these research. And for research, the way they research the stuff, they just want to know whether it is familiar. They don't. Every woman who's watching it, the moment she says "Ha, ye to hota hai," they will think it's a good ad. Look, we have convinced. But if you want to show them something that hasn't been seen before, just because women in some rooms reject it, they reject it.
What do you make of this big new announcement from Unilever? Because it got a lot of attention and was a really big step. Do you see that as setting off a lot of change across board where beauty, hair, and those categories are concerned?
See, the way Fair and Lovely, if you see the kind of women that it has in its fold, I don't even know whether they know fair means Gora. They just know ki I have to become Gora. So, and that is the thing, mujhe gori honi hai, aur gori hone se main sundar hoongi, and that for them. So what this is happening is on a very, like all of us talking about it,
Yeah.
So whereas when you look at a person who buys a 80 rupees Dove soap, there the conversation is different. So, you have to, I don't know whether this trickles down to the real target audience of Fair and Lovely.
Okay. Abanti, you've headed ASCI, the Advertising Standards Council of India. Do you see that, how women are projected, what women are doing? Do you see the conversation about, brand and marketing communication and advertising where women are concerned change? And have you seen it change over a period of time? And do you feel it's in a good space?
Well, I think absolutely one is seeing the change. And, I have a lot of sort of brands that come to my mind when I think about, which are brands which are really sort of showing a more progressive portrayal of gender and roles. And, in no particular order, I can think of, Ariel, Sunsilk, Mahindra Rise, Reebok, Hotstar, Ola. I mean, these are just some brands that come to Titan Raga. And, I think sometimes it's better to start than to wait for a perfect start. And I absolutely feel that there is a shift and that it will only get accelerated as time moves on. Now, yes, there will always be some level of tokenism that will be felt, perceived tokenism, not necessarily actual tokenism. And I think if you look at the companies as a whole, so if you take HUL as a whole, you need to see, well, what is this company all about? What is its larger purpose? Is it there to make a difference in the world? What kind of gender diversity that it has within its own organization? Are there women who are in key leadership positions? And then you look at, okay, so what they are saying through their brands, is it tokenism or not? So I think, when we say that, we need to look at the company holistically as well, and not just through the lens of brands. As I think Paromita said, ultimately marketing and advertising is about selling the product. And you can't get away from the uncomfortable truth that our society and large sections of women themselves are still very, very conditioned to be traditional. And we've got to accept, therefore, that there is a little bit of a delicate balance that marketeers have to play. And yet, like I said, there are a large number of brands with fairly powerful advertising, which is challenging the conventional stereotype roles and representation of women
Abanti,
in
I'm going to
advertising.
take one last question to everybody. Paromita, is any word of advice that you want to give marketers and brand managers and ad agency folks watching this about how you'd like to see them being really useful in this conversation of gender inclusion and equality?
I think, it's not something, I'm nobody to advise marketers, but when we talk about storytelling, I think I was just listening to Swati talking about how research is done. And I think the most important thing about research is the questions that we ask, right? So if we never ask any new questions, either of ourselves or of people, we'll always get the same old answers. And I think storytelling doesn't work through an Excel sheet. Somewhere or the other, you have to also go with your gut. You have to go with celebrating the thing you believe in. I'm, not a I feel a lot of the time when we are talking about brands and advertising, it falls into that, oh, isn't my husband nice? He made dinner today mode. Like we're handing out lollipops for small changes. And yes, so you can pat somebody on the head for a small change, but you can't celebrate it as a great revolution in my eyes. But I just think that storytelling happens just the way that if you're somebody on a dating app trying to talk to somebody, it's really helpful to be able to see them as a whole person, right? So I think all you want to see is women and queer people represented as whole people, not just as symbols of their identity in anything that you see. And for that, you just need to look at the world a little differently, and you need to ask different questions, and I think find new ways of telling stories.
Okay. Swati, how far along the road of smashing patriarchy is advertising?
I have seen it happen, and I've seen now, like, there are lots of successful stories about how brands have helped you shift the gaze, or how brands have nudged society. I just have one dream wish that, while we allow men and we think it's okay for them to be misfits, I don't think we let women be misfits. And until and unless even in a 30-second ad, you see a misfit mother, you see a misfit daughter, you see I think women are just supposed to fit in to whichever role. And that's where the problem happens, because the more we show stories about not fitting in, not being what I think that's will allow more granular storytelling.
Abanti, do you see more women in leadership roles allowing, therefore, more communication of the fact that you can be a misfit?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the starting point. If people in powerful and influential positions will take that lead, then I think that's a good place to be in. And I think fundamentally we all lose without diversity, and therefore I think it behoves on companies and particularly big brands to shape emerging trends and lead on that versus just portraying the current status quo.
Sure, super. Thank you very much, Abanti, Swati, Paromita. It was lovely talking to you, and thanks for all the insights. I'm sure people are listening and looking for new ways to listen also. And thank you very much for watching. Do catch us again for another conversation on the Media Dialogues, and stay tuned to CNBC TV 18.